Hello, everyone, and welcome to the book discussion for I Can't Wait to Call You My Wife, African American Letters of Love and Family in the Civil War Era. I know you can't see me, but you can hear me. My name is Anna Hearn, and I'm representing Pyramid Art Books and Custom Framing. And it is my honor to introduce our guest moderator today. Reverend Dr. Denise Donnell is an ordained elder in the Mississippi Conference of the United Methodist Church. Dr. Donnell holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from Jackson State University, a Master of Arts degree in Secondary Education from the University of Mississippi, a Master of Divinity degree from Perkins School of Theology, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Education, Administration, and Supervision from Jackson State University. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Reverend Dr. Denise Donnell and our featured speaker today, Dr. Rita Roberts.
Thank you so much, Anna. I am extremely excited to be in this space today to facilitate this conversation with Dr. Roberts. I want to say a special thank you to Pyramid, to Anna, to Garbo Hearn, for all of the work, to Patrice, for all the work that we have done together as a team to make this happen. And to those of you who are in the space, I can see you. I see you live and in color. Thank you for joining us in person. It is a privilege and an honor to be here with you on today. And for those of you who are here virtually, yes, thank you so much for showing up in this space. This is going to be a profound conversation. I already feel it in my bones that we're going to walk away from here renewed and transformed by this conversation. So let me introduce our guest, Dr. Rita Roberts. Dr. Rita Roberts is a writer and a historian. Dr. Roberts holds a master's and PhD degree in history from the University of California, Berkeley. She is currently retiring from her professorship of history and Africana studies at Scripps College, where she holds the Nathan Wright Stevenson Chair in History and Biography. Her courses engage students in the study of the history of the early United States. 16th through 21st century African American history, the African diaspora, Black intellectuals, and the politics of race, and the modern civil rights movement, among other topics. And Dr. Roberts has the distinguished honor of being on Oprah's book list with this book that we are here to discuss today. I Can't Wait to Call You My Wife. Dr. Roberts, thank you so much for being here. Greet us today, will you?
Thank you so much, Dr. Donnell. It's really a pleasure to be with everyone. I also want to thank the Pyramid Bookstore, Garbo Hearn and Anna Hearn, and you, Dr. Donnell, for participating in this interview, helping to organize it. It's been a joy to interact with you as we prepared for today. So thank you all.
Is there something, Dr. Roberts, that you would like us to know about yourself that we did not mention in the biography? I want to give you a chance to define yourself for yourself, as Audre Lorde would say.
Ah, how sweet. So I think that it's important to realize that when I studied history long time ago, African American history was almost non-existent. I'm from a generation that even in high school and in college, very little was said about African American history. Even though I was interested in history, I really wasn't planning to go into history. I was going to go into journalism and then in law. But I decided to get a master's in history at Cal Berkeley, and in preparation for going to law. And I began taking courses in African American history, and I couldn't stop. I was mesmerized and realized that there's so much out there to do, so much I didn't know, so much we don't know. And so it kind of became a mission to me to make sure that not only I learn as much as I could, but that I share with as many people who might be interested in learning about our past, our collective past, our US past, our world past.
I must say that that word mesmerized is one that I can use to describe our conversation, the very first conversation that we had. I remember we were trying to figure out, are we going to go virtual, or are we going to be on Zoom? Are we going to have a phone call? And I was like, no, I want to see your face. I want to feel your energy. And then to hear you talk about the percentage of people who are enslaved who were writers, and you began to just impart knowledge to me that I had never heard before. And I walked away from our conversation mesmerized as well. And I was also wondering what happened in your life. I know you were taking all of these classes and you were being pulled in by the knowledge that you were learning, and you could not stop because you were energized by the information that you were receiving and this call to action that says that I need to share it. But what was it in your life that happened? Can you share the story of what made you say, I need to write this book right here? I can't wait to call you my wife. Like, what was the impetus for that?
That's really such an important question. I have written articles, books about African Americans, mostly free Blacks, in the past, and these are scholarly works, and scholars tend to read other scholars' works if they're in that particular field. But I was often invited by churches, other organizations, fraternities, to give talks on African American history. Churches that are made up mostly of European Americans and also African Americans. And so to give a talk on African American history is a very broad topic, as you might guess. And so I began doing what I do with my students, and that is to read letters or read some primary document to sort of pull the audience in. And because my specialty is 19th century and late colonial period, of course, I focus mostly on the 19th century. And I gave a talk at what is called Couples Club in Southern California. And I, of course, these are African Americans who have been together for over 25 years, who meet together to enrich their marriages. This is in Southern California. And I read letters written between husbands and wives, enslaved and non-enslaved, to this group. And I could see the attraction. It was, they couldn't stop asking me questions. And so I decided, well, I need to do something about this. I need to write this book. So I began working on it a decade ago, and sort of doing other things, teaching administrative work as well, but also sort of collecting materials. And that's what caused me to write this book. And I also found this letter written by John Washington, which essentially says, I can't wait to call you my wife, to his fiancée, Annie Gordon. And I said, okay, that's the title. So that was sort of the stimulus, the catalyst for this book.
I can absolutely see how that happened, because I sat down to read these letters, some of them aloud to someone who's very special to me, and together just the energy that's created by reading the stories, it's undeniable. And then some of them are sad and some of them are joyful, and it's just a ride, right? It's an emotional roller coaster almost. But it's for those of you who are not sure what we're talking about, here is our book, I Can't Wait to Call You My Wife, African American Letters of Love and Family in the Civil War Era, written by Dr. Rita Roberts. These books are available to you right now at Pyramid Bookstore. And if you go online, you are able to purchase this book as well. So this is what we are talking about today. This is what we are discussing. And I wonder, Dr. Roberts, if you could just give us a brief synopsis of the book. We know it's love letters. We know that they're about love and family. These are people who are enslaved during the Civil War era. What else can you tell us about the contents of your book?
So I think it's important to recognize that this is a book of the voice of African Americans. Most of the reading will be from the voice of African Americans in the 19th century. And essentially, despite a bloody war that tore the nation apart, African Americans, free and enslaved, intensified their determination to build family, to maintain family, to continue to establish community ties, and engage in love and courtship, despite a horrific war. And individuals who were under some of the most horrific conditions expressed their voice to their husbands and to their wives, to their children, children to parents, about what's going on, but also simply talking about ordinary events of the day. So what we see in this book, I think, is the degree to which the letters between enslaved individuals and those who are free is that family is central. The centrality of family is evident among all populations of African Americans, whether free or enslaved, urban or rural. They demonstrate the complexity and the diversity of African American experience. And there are great examples. I could just to add a little bit, Dr. Donnell. There are examples, for example, of a family that I sort of trace from the antebellum period, the pre-Civil War period, during the war, and post-Civil War. Enslaved, then experiencing the war, and then free. And to read those letters of the Plummer family, I encourage you to read those. Emily Plummer, who is illiterate, she cannot write or read, but she depends upon others. Her husband can barely write or read, and yet they communicate with one another. And the love they have for one another is profound. And it can't help but stir your heart when you realize what they're going through.
I think that what you're saying speaks to this letter by John Copeland that I fell in love with on page 53. There's this one line, there's a line at the beginning. I know we're going to have you read a letter a little later on, but right now I just want to talk about this one line that I think speaks to what you just talked about the complexity of living with the dehumanization of the institution of slavery, and yet finding joy, and yet chasing love, and yet demonstrating and manifesting that love in our bodies, even though we were going through such horrific trauma. And so at the beginning of the letter, Copeland writes, "I am well at this time and as happy as it is possible to be under the circumstances." And so it seems like a paradox that you are extremely excited because he's about to be executed the next morning. And he's writing to his parents to say, "I know that this is my end. It's almost time for my life to be snuffed out. And yet I am as happy as I can possibly be." So I wonder if you could just talk a moment about what that's like, what you learned through the letters about finding joy in the midst of it all and in such horrific circumstances.
John Copeland's letter is an amazing letter. I agree with you. It's one I had to include. There were many others. I had lots of choices, believe it or not. We always hear that there are no sources, lots of sources for African American history. 25-year-old who was living in Ohio and very much an abolitionist. And obviously you can read in his letter, he's well educated. He joined John Brown's raid, 1859, hoping that he could be instrumental in ending slavery. And I kind of think that even though many, like Frederick Douglass and others, said, that's a foolish mission, you don't understand the degree to which the entire South and the nation protects slavery. It won't happen. You will not be able to end slavery with a raid, John Brown. There were some African Americans, mostly John Brown's children, who engaged in this raid. John Copeland, 25 years old, decides to participate may have realized that Frederick Douglass was right and that it may not succeed, but may serve as a catalyst, and it certainly did, to end slavery. It certainly did. It helped to bring things together, no doubt about it. So he's a carpenter, abolitionist, teacher, and then goes to fight in this raid. And of course, he is caught, not shot, but he is caught and to be executed. And he writes to his parents, Charlestown, Virginia, November 26, 1859, dear father and mother. And then he explains how important his mission was, that it was a holy crusade. So he reflects that sense of a sacred mission. And he's not unlike many other abolitionists, especially African-American abolitionists, who believed that they had to end slavery at whatever cost. And it's a profound letter. And how he is at peace with himself. He keeps saying, I'm at peace with myself. I know I'm going to be executed. He may have been tortured. I wouldn't at all be surprised. But he knows that he's dying for a good cause. It brings tears to your eyes. That kind of dedication at 25 years old.
I think there's also this line of concern in the letter for me that I'd like you to speak to, because even though Copeland is at peace with himself, this is a holy crusade for him. He, at this point of writing, when he was participating in the raid, he was not a Christian, but his parents, who are aware that his life is about to end, they are concerned about his soul. They are concerned about his salvation, and they encourage him to come to know Jesus before he dies, so that they can be at peace, so that they can feel some sense of satisfaction that they know what his end is going to be in the spiritual realm. And so, writing this letter, Copeland agrees to come to know Christ just before he is executed. So this role that religion is playing in the lives of those who are enslaved, I think that this is something for us to consider, especially since, for me, I feel like this role now, the way that we are practicing religion, is actually more harmful to our cause of ending the institution of slavery in its modern day iterations. And so I wonder, do you have any thoughts about the role of religion and how we see it being used now, as opposed to how it was practiced with our ancestors who were enslaved, and to kind of see this? He felt a holy crusade, even though he wasn't a Christian, but his parents were like, no, in order to be holy, you need to be a Christian. So I just wanted you to speak to that piece.
So I'm not sure his parents knew what he was going to be doing when he joined. It's not clear that they knew that he joined John Brown's raid. We don't know, or at least I don't know that. And certainly he had been exposed to Christianity. And so it's sort of 19th century notion of being Christian is different from, I would say, a 21st century notion of being Christian. Almost the entire population of the United States had some, not only knowledge, but some acceptance of Christianity. And so he is saying toward the end, I have accepted Christ, I've been converted. He's telling his parents, he's assuring his parents, right, that he is going to, let me just see if I can find that letter again. He's assuring them that he will die at peace with God, right? I was just trying to find this one. He said,
it's in the second paragraph. Dear
if
Father,
die I must, I shall try to meet my fate as a man who can suffer in the glorious cause in which I have been engaged without a groan, and meet my maker, right? And in heaven as a Christian man who through the saving grace of God has made his peace with him. The majority of people of African descent were not Christian until the post-Civil War era. We need to understand that. Many, if not most, had exposure to Christianity, but were not Christianized until Black preachers were able to become ministers in much fuller force, and until African Americans in the South, because the majority of people of African descent are in the South and enslaved, until they are emancipated and have access to churches, to Black churches. So that's when we see the majority of people of African descent Christianized. Traditional West African, Central African religions were practiced and combined with Christianity. So you see a variety of expressions of religion in the antebellum period and before. Those in the North are mostly Christian. So we just need to understand that this is an evolution of this process. Now, regarding today, I think you, Dr. Donnell, can speak more to that than I can about what's going on today.
I probably so, and I'm laughing because I see Pastor Wendell Griffin is in the audience today, and he's in person here at Pyramid. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that it is because of his wife, Dr. Patricia Griffin, that with this connection was made between Pyramid and you, Dr. Roberts, in order for this event to materialize. And I am so excited that she was able to connect these dots so that we can have this conversation.
Can I just interrupt? Because I have in my little notebook, be sure to thank Pat Griffin. And I neglected to do that. Hello, Pat, and thank you so much for making the connection.
Yeah, so I do think that there's lots to say about the role of Christianity as it relates to how we are fighting and how we are moving and how we see, how we feel a sense of holiness in what we are doing in the struggle toward collective liberation. But I feel like that's a whole conversation we can have another day. So I want to move to a conversation about, because as you were talking about Copeland, you were talking about this letter, which is between a child and parents, right? And it's not a letter to him, to his lover, or to his spouse, or to his wife. This was between him and his parents. But there's another letter that is about this between a parent and a child. And I was hoping that you would speak to it as well. It's from Annie Douglas to her father, Frederick Douglass. It's on page 94. And I'm not asking you to read the entire letter, because I know you've selected some letters that you would like to read, but just the poem about slavery, that she's talking to her father and she's letting him know that her studies in German are going well. She's surpassing the students who are in her class. She's doing better than they're doing, and they've been there longer than she is. She's so excited about what she's learning. And this poem, she's ready. She's preparing herself to recite. And I just wonder if you would lift up that poem to us that this child is sharing with her father in all of her excitement as she continues to be an activist even at 10 years old.
At 10 years old. Well, the entire Douglas family, as you know, are activists, and Annie couldn't help but become an activist. So just a little context, Annie is writing to her father in England because he basically escaped to England in order not to be arrested, because he was considered an accomplice of John Brown, even though he was not. And the fear was that he could be arrested and taken to Virginia and perhaps executed. So he escaped to England. And so that's why he's in England. And she's writing to her father from Rochester, which is where he launched the North Star newspaper and other newspapers that he published and edited. And so Annie is only 10 years old. She's writing an addition to a letter that her sister, Rosetta, had written. So Annie includes her letter in her sister's letter, her older sister's letter, Rosetta. This is December 7th, 1859. And again, she says, I'm proceeding in my German very well. And she brags, as Dr. Donnell said, that I'm doing better than even the German students, by the way. And it's important to know that this family is an amazing family. And I have images. There are I didn't mention in the synopsis, but there are quite a few photographs in this book. And we have photographs, the only photograph of Annie that is in existence. And it is on page 95. So she writes this poem. She's bragging to her father, I've learned another piece, and it's about slavery, she says. And I'm going to give this speech, her creation about slavery in school. And she says, my piece is this. This is not the man for me who buys or sells a slave, for he who will not set him free, but send him to his grave. But he whose noble heart beats warm for all men's life and liberty, who loves alike each human form, that's the man for me. That's a 10-year-old poem. I think it's quite amazing. And you, in fact, Dr. Donnell, have selected one of the letters that I was going to read. It's one of my favorite letters. I think it's because she's 10 years old. Yeah.
Well, I think also because it speaks to, you're talking about, you focus so much, the book is focused solely on Black families. And so there's a significance that we know that just comes alive when you are talking about these Black families as you are going through the book and why you wrote the book and what it means to you. And just to focus on the significance of an enslaved family, right? So this is a letter between a parent and a child, but the child is already thinking forward to the family she wants to have. What kind of husband would I want to call me wife? Like, I'm thinking about a man who has this kind of honor, not a man who would enslave someone, but a man who honors the liberty of every soul. So just thinking about just how this whole trajectory of family, that's one of the reasons I was attracted to the letter by Annie, who's 10 years old. And so I want to ask you to talk
let
more
me just interrupt again, because they are not enslaved. They are free. They're in the North. Frederick Douglass escaped slavery. He ran away in 1838. He escaped slavery. His wife, Anna, was free in Maryland. He escaped from Maryland, and she, not his wife, but his fiance, then followed him. And they married in New York and then moved to New Bedford, Massachusetts, and then Rochester. And they began having children in New Bedford, Massachusetts. So they are free.
Right.
They're
So
he's a fugitive slave, and all the children are free.
Yes, thank you for the correction. What I was saying is that the book is about the significance of family, and I wanted you to talk about your focus on family, especially on an enslaved family. I just meant in general in the book.
Right.
So
Okay.
thank you for the
Thank
correction.
you.
Yes,
Yes.
because there are enslaved families writing to each other in the book as well. Yes.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Yes.
So yeah, so family is so important for us to realize. And if we're going to think about anything today in terms of the relevance of this book to today, and I hope it is relevant in multiple ways, the determination to maintain an established family is part of African American protest culture. We need to understand that. We need to understand that the slavery system that was established in the United States allowed only for individuals to be owned by other individuals, which meant that laws were passed to protect the interest of those who owned other individuals. And a law that was passed beginning the colonial period until it is removed with the emancipation in 1865, the constitutional amendment that abolished slavery, did not allow for enslaved people to marry. Not one colony, all 13 colonies had slaves. Not one colony and not one state allowed for enslaved people to marry. This is racial slavery. Slavery is defended and justified by the invention of a racial construct that argued that all people of European descent are superior to all people of African descent. That's how they justified enslaving other people and arguing for liberty, freedom, and equality. That's how they did that in their minds. Didn't work. So what African American people do is engage in a project to express their humanity. They do it naturally as human beings. They establish family, even though the families are not legitimized. They establish family, they have children, they court, they love, they express their humanity in a way that is universal. Perhaps the most universal thing we can do is engage in family. But this system allowed only for kinlessness. So in law, there was no husband enslaved, there was no wife enslaved. These individuals were considered only property, to be auctioned, to be sold, to be passed down in a will, to be traded, and so on. African Americans pushed back against this commodification, this system that is dehumanizing. They are not dehumanized. We need to be really clear about that. African Americans are not dehumanized. The system is dehumanizing. And what African Americans do is engage in what is the most universal act that human beings can engage in, forming family. It's considered the foundation of society, the foundation of community, and that is their expression of who they are. And it's important for us to understand the degree to which they went through so much to express their interest in maintaining family, community, friendship, and so on. It's a part of protest. We just really need to understand that. The notion of kinlessness is something that scholars have written about it, talking about parents had no right to protect their children, child being beaten, parents couldn't intervene, no way to provide for the welfare of their children, and slave codes enforced the slaveholders' right to separate families, to sell a wife, to sell a husband, because they were not acknowledged as kin. And this is one of the most important points I want us to all understand in this book. African Americans push back against that and call each other wife, call each other husband, say these are their children. And of course, slaveholders recognized the value of having wives and husbands when it suited their interests. But African Americans continue to establish the importance of family, and it's a means of saying we are more human than property. We refuse to be commodified.
I love that. Black love as resistance, right?
Yes,
celebrating Black
absolutely.
love, embodying Black love, the Black family as an act of resistance, as an act of protest. I love that. We want to make sure that we are leaving some time for people to ask questions who are with us virtually and live at Pyramid Bookstore, 1001 Wright Avenue, right here in the city of Little Rock, in the state of Arkansas. But before that, I know you've selected a letter that you would like to read. Want to give you an opportunity to do that for us.
Well, there's so many letters. I mean, I have, you mentioned Annie Douglas, which is one of my favorite, but I think there's another letter that I think is so interesting. And Sarah Logue is a slaveholder, and she writes to Jermaine Logan, who is now a minister, had escaped and escaped to Canada and then went to New York and became a prominent minister. And so in 1860, she has no idea that the Civil War is about to occur. She writes to Jermaine Logan, and she says to him that she wants him to she said, because you ran away, I had to sell Abe and Anne and 12 acres of land, and I want you to send the money that I may be able to redeem the land that you was the cause of our selling. And on receipt of the above named sum of money, I will send you a bill of sale. She's writing to Jermaine Logan, who is now a minister, prominent minister in Syracuse, New York, fugitive slave, and she's telling him to buy himself out of slavery. She wants $1,000, by the way. His response is profound. Now, just imagine yourself and what you would say. You're escaped, and she wants him to buy himself. And he says, you are a woman, but had you, this is just an excerpt, it's a long letter, but had you a woman's heart, you could never have insulted a brother by telling him you sold his only remaining brother and sister, because he put himself beyond your power to convert him into money. This is on page 79. You sold my brother and my sister Abe and Ann and 12 acres of land, you say, because I ran away. And now you have the unutterable meanness to ask me to return and be your miserable chattel, or in lieu thereof, send you 1,000 to enable you to redeem the land, but not to redeem my poor brother and sister. And it goes on. He is angry, rightly so, and lets her know it in no uncertain terms. And it's a valuable letter because I think it speaks to so many things. It speaks to the arrogance of slaveholding, first of all. Can you imagine? Thinking that somebody's going to actually send her money, but she believes this. That's the arrogance of race, arrogance of slaveholding. And it speaks to abolitionism because Jermaine Logan is a prominent abolitionist. He's also part of the Underground Railroad, helping, like Frederick Douglass and many, many others, enable those who escaped slavery to get to the North and get to Canada. But they also print these letters in abolitionist newspapers so that they can help the Northerners who might be sympathetic to getting rid of slavery understand how horrific slavery is. And it helps to reveal who slaveholders are. And so it has multiple levels. And so I like it for that reason.
I like it too. I'm so glad that you shared it with us. I like it too, because I think that for some of us, we have this idea that people who were enslaved were weak and did not have courage. They were not bold, and they were dull and unimaginative. We have this idea, it's a false narrative that we've been taught to believe. And so here you have this formerly enslaved person saying, no, I will speak my truth. I will honor my life. I will lift up the lives of my brother and sister, and I will let you know how faulty you are in your thinking and how misguided you are in who you think I am. Let me tell you who I am and the type. So this boldness and this confidence that emanates from this letter, I think we need to know that that is there in the lives of people who are enslaved or formerly enslaved and people who have been freed.
And he's not unusual. He's not an exception. He's the rule. We need to understand. I can't tell you how many of my students, especially African-American students, had such a distorted notion of who we are. Incredible, rich cultural elements, incredible determination, and character that is hardly understandable. High moral ground. We just need to understand that people of African descent had the same kind of determination and character like Jermaine Logan. The majority are not weak. Of course, they're in horrific circumstances and cannot always, excuse me, there's something going on here with my background.
So while she's taking care of that, just wanted to continue this conversation of how important it is for us, especially members of the African diaspora, those of us who are Black, and I'm using the African diaspora to define all of us as Black, African American, how important it is for us to get to know who we are, to get to know our full selves, and to divest from this system of white inhumanity that has painted us as anything less than divine.
Yeah, so sorry. I had a screensaver on the background and it started talking. Yeah, so I think it's really important that we not swallow the myth that we were weak and dumb and ignorant. We now know 5 to 10% of the population enslaved, talking 4 million people in 1860, were exposed to some degree of literacy. At least 5 to 10% were literate on the plantations. We now know this, and could have been higher. So they were able to read the newspapers of the day. They were able to read the fear and of slaveholding society. They were very much aware of the dependence upon their labor. And this is about labor. We need to understand that slavery is the cheapest, most exploitable labor, and that's why it existed. And they are able to understand the degree to which the argument that European Americans were superior to African Americans was absolutely a myth. They saw it every day. And if we're going to talk at all about today, we need to be able to read through the lines as they did, as our ancestors did, to understand the subtext, because that's what they did in this period.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts, for this book, for your energy around the book, for these letters, and for what they lift up for us. I want to pause right now to make sure that we give the live listening audience, as well as the virtual audience, an opportunity now to ask any question that you may have. I think there may be a question already in the chat, so we can, let me just, yes, since there's already a question here, let's start with this one and then we will move to the live audience. Greetings to Dr. Roberts and Dr. Donnell. Thank you for an informative and interesting presentation. ASALH.org has a national theme for 2023, Black Resistance. This book, I Can't Wait to Call You My Wife, fits in perfectly with this theme, even though I am not supposed to buy another book, smile. This will become one of mine. And this is Ellen from Harlem. So I wanted to make sure we got that comment in. So if you would, so now we have Garbo. I see Garbo in the room, ready for those of you who may have a question for Dr. Roberts. We are ready to hear them. If you are virtual and you want to send your question in the form of the chat, that's fine. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question live in the space, we can spotlight you for that to happen as well. So now we'll turn it over to the live audience with Garbo.
Hi, Dr. Roberts.
Hello.
Welcome from Little Rock.
Thank you. I like Little Rock.
Dr. Roberts, this is Pat Griffin.
Hi,
Thank
Pat.
you so much for accepting this invitation during such a busy time of the year. When Dr. Terrence Roberts, your husband, shared with us the great news, I immediately contacted Garbo, and she got right on it. So I'm glad it became a reality for the end of the year. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I did not know that was you, Dr. Griffin. I see your husband just sit right there. And I just imagine, you know what, we should ask Pastor Griffin, did you look at And Dr. Griffin, Dr. Patricia Griffin said, I can't wait. I can't imagine that story. We got to hear that story too. I can't wait to call you my wife. My apologies, Dr. Griffin, for not recognizing you in the room. I did not know that that was you. Thank you so much for your presence.
No problem. Thank you for doing such a good job of conducting this book discussion, Dr. Donnell. Thank you.
You are welcome. I'm so glad that you connected us. Want to also lift up this question for you, Dr. Roberts. All forms of organized social effort were forbidden, yet the letters are a literary conduit of resistance, a rebellion striving a claim to humanity. Are the letters also a refuge from the hostile white world? It's from Phyllis Brown.
Thank you, Phyllis, for that question. Yes, indeed. I didn't actually say that in those words. Wish I had, but definitely the ability to communicate with one another enabled not simply the ability to maintain familial ties, and that's why the letters are so important. They were able to maintain familial ties, even though they were not on the same plantation, separated. But yes, absolutely. The idea of being able to write to your loved one and express your feelings, sometimes subtly, not always able to express exactly what you felt, had to be a refuge. Absolutely, I agree completely.
Garbo, do you have a question in the audience? I do have another question here, but want to make sure that we are giving everyone an opportunity.
Yes, I do. I have my own copy, and I just couldn't put it down. One of the things as a family genealogist, my family is from South Carolina, but I immediately went to the index and said, why do I know that maybe my family said this? Because I want to hear your voice. You spoke to the refusal of the enslaver to legitimize marriage. I thought one marriage and divorce was handled very well in the letters of the Barnwells. Jane and Sarah, the mother and daughter-in-law, on page 152. If we could share that I thought that was really excellent. What happened during that time? Sarah is the mother of Martin. Martin has been taken away for years. So Jane decides to marry Ferguson. But I thought how excellent it was the way it was handled. Could you address that?
So I'm being asked to contextualize the letter of that.
Yes. Jane's response mainly to Ferguson.
Jane's response. So what's important for us to understand is that enslaved people were often forced to marry, not legally, not given, but forced to have children by individuals for whom they did not love. And during the war, what we see is that Sarah and her daughter-in-law, Jane, are in a refugee camp during the war. Many enslaved people they helped to end the war. They helped to bring about the war and end the war because they rushed to Union lines to escape slavery. And so Sarah, the mother-in-law, and Jane are in a refugee camp. And Jane is married to someone who is very much in love with her. And she finds out that Martin, Sarah's son, is alive. She thought that Martin was dead. That's why she married. And again, marriage is not legitimized yet. That's why she married someone else. And so what happens is that Jane essentially does what a lot of women and men did. They divorced and married those they preferred to be with. When she found out that Martin was still alive, she let the man she was then living with know that she was going to be with Martin and that he would just have to understand. This is all going on during the war. The war is going on at this very moment. People are shooting and so on just outside the refugee camps. But these kinds of decisions, this is about the complexity of African-American experience. These kinds of decisions were made. They're made after the war, during the war, and during the war. And it's amazing. So Elizabeth von Hume, who writes about this in First Days Amongst the Contraband meaning the refugees, is amazed that these enslaved people, formerly enslaved people, now refugees from slavery, are making decisions with incredible wisdom, with incredible sensitivity and determination. They know right from wrong and they make those decisions. Does that help contextualize it?
Yes. And what does she say? What does the wife say and tell the first?
So
Says.
she essentially says at the end, she said, well, Ferguson, the man who believes he is married to Jane and wants to have a life with her forever, he says, I will get a house, we will live together, never mind what people say, come to me. And she says, tell him I'm very sorry. He finds it so hard to do his duty. But as he does find it hard to do his duty, I shall do mine. And I will always pray for the Lord to bless him.
She divorces him. She divorces him. And he's at the work. And she says, Martin is my husband. He's the father of my child.
Yes.
Ferguson is a man. Ferguson, she divorces Ferguson. He's a man.
Yes, so it's not a legal divorce,
No.
but we
But
call it a
wasn't legal
divorce.
marriage, right? It wasn't a legal marriage, but in the courts.
Precisely, right.
In the courts, they were married.
And that tells us the degree of the profound love that enslaved people have for one another. They make practical decisions. Her practical decision was to marry Ferguson, right? To take care of her. She's in the 19th century. Women can't get jobs, right? The reality is that she needed someone to help her. She made a practical decision, but her love was for Martin. And once she realizes Martin is alive, it's very clear to her what her duty is.
And she's willing to perform that duty at all costs.
Absolutely.
Whatever I have to do to be with Martin, that's what I'm going to do. So that drive, that determination, we continue to talk about that as people who are suffering under these conditions. They never lost sight of that drive, that determination, and never lost sight of that love. And I think that's what you are lifting up for us through this book.
And I hope that we can continue that. I hope that, obviously, that's your point. I want to just stress it more.
Yes.
I hope that we understand that's our heritage and that we can maintain the importance of family, the importance of community, and continue to lift up one another, affirm one another, and support one another.
And on that note, Pat, if I may, I was so, first of all, this is a voluminous work that you have done. And thank you for making it available for the general public. It's scholarly work, but it's also readable by the general public. What touched me so was the eloquence of expression, the depth of the love that these individuals had for each other. Their level of intellect that came through these letters. And it must have been a challenge to decipher the handwritten script, because it was such a flair to the writing, looking at the original script, that I can't imagine how much time it must have taken for you to have deciphered the writing so that it could be in a printable form. I just wanted to commend you on this work. But I do have a question. You mentioned earlier, there is so much about our history that we don't know. How did we lose her? Are you still there, Dr. Roberts?
I think we lost her. I'm going to try to call her on the phone and see if we can't get her back.
You know, as you're doing that, I thought about the scribes, the people who actually wrote the letters for them, because Elizabeth Barton wrote the letters for Sarah and Jane. And I thought about, and also there was a commander that wrote Ferguson back to her. And also in the book, you see other writing for them. I thought, no, it wasn't. I'm sure as a researcher, it wasn't easy for her.
I have another question.
As I said before, and your question is?
Leave it to it.
Is there a question now?
Dr. Roberts is doing her best to get back to us. While we're waiting for her, let's read some of these comments that we have that are in the chat from those people who are watching virtually. I think this question, as soon as Dr. Roberts is back on with us, would be a great way for us to end our time together. The question asks, says, I can't wait to read your book. This was a wonderful conversation. Thanks to you and Dr. Donnell. What are you working on next? So we'll be excited to hear how Dr. Roberts answers that question. Thank you so much for this book. As I become more aware of my rich and profound heritage, your book will be added to my library. It will be a resource that I plan to share with my family. Thank you so much. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this time together at this point in the year, because we are hoping that you will say, yes, not only do I need this book for my shelf, but I can gift it to someone. Those of you who believe in gifting people this time of year, what a wonderful gift that will give us more insight into who we are as members of the African of African descent, and who we should be teaching ourselves and others that we are, rather than believing what is being told and taught about us. So Dr. Roberts, we're so glad that you are back. So sorry for that.
So sorry, I don't know what happened.
Technology, you love it and hate it at the same time. But there is this question that we do think it would be great for you to answer. Want to know, what are you working on next? What is your next project? Janice wants to know. Cannot wait to hear.
So thank you for that question. Scholars always like for people to know what they're doing, or usually like, I am working on looking at free Blacks in the South from the 17th century until the mid to late 19th century. There are free Blacks who were free in the early 17th century. They were treated like indentured servants, not slaves. Not clear that they were ever enslaved. And I'm just trying to follow families as best I can. It's not easy. The documents are not readily available, but because they gained property as an indentured servant, land, it's easy to look at the tax records. So I'm trying to find as many tax records as I can. And the free Blacks had to register by around 1830 in Virginia, North Carolina, and so on, or have certificates. So tracking the court records, and many were highly litigious. They were protecting their property all the time. So finding those records, they're not leaving diaries, they're not leaving letters, but I'm trying to find out how they survived as free in a system that did not believe any Black person should be free, especially just before the Civil War. States began passing laws, and Arkansas is the most well-known and infamous state that passes laws to enslave all people who are free, who are of African descent, and begin doing so. If they don't leave the state, they will be enslaved. Other states start passing these laws. And so it's really important to sort of follow, how do they navigate the system and maintain their freedom? It's a quasi-freedom. It's not, by no means the kind of freedom that a person of European descent has, but it's better than enslavement for most of them, or many of them. So I'm tracing that. That's my new project, and I've been working on it for quite a few years. Thank you for asking that question.
Dr. Roberts, we are at time, but we do need to go back to one more question, because before you were cut off, Dr. Patricia Griffin was asking you a question and she was not able to finish it nor hear your response. So if you all don't mind being a little patient with us, we do know that it's 4 o'clock here and 5 o'clock there. Please let us allow Dr. Griffin's question to be posed again.
Well, actually, I'm going to refer my time to Wendell. He has been trying to get a question in, so I'm going to refer to him on this.
Because I can't wait to call you my husband. Look at that love at work. Okay, okay. Pastor.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. The question I have is, what do you think parent generation of people, couples, spouses, can learn from your research, given that so little letter writing is being done and that so much communication is happening via computers, emails, text messages, and we lose that?
So that's a wonderful question. And I have thought about that question quite often. And I think that whether we use email, although I prefer longhand letter writing, handwritten letter writing, maybe it's the historian in me, but I think emails and certainly text disallow us to really express who we are. And I think a longhand letter helps us, and it's more private. We all know emails are not private. More private really allows us to write directly to the person. And so if we learn anything, I think we need to learn not only the importance of maintaining communication with family, loved ones, community, but we also need to recognize how important it is for us as people of African descent to communicate with one another, to value one another. And I think we see that in the letters among the abolitionists, among the enslaved people. I include letters in which grandmothers are trying to get their children out of what is kind of a apprenticeship program, but it's really another kind of slavery. After the Civil War, even during the Civil War and after the Civil War. And so that determination is evident. And I hope that we can continue that kind of determination. We've certainly seen it, even in the 20th century, 21st century. Black Lives Matter is an amazing movement, but we need more, and we need to be more involved, and we need to find ways of lifting one another up and not condemning one another.
Dr. Roberts, thank you so much for joining us today. What a delight this has been. Informational, educational, motivational. We are so glad that you were here. Join me, those of you if you are virtually, if you are in person, join me in gifting you Dr. Roberts, with our gift of gratitude for your work, for your continued work, for your continued presence in this space as a historian, as a member of the African diaspora, as our sibling, as the one that we love as well. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Pyramid. Oh, wait, first, Dr. Roberts, did you have any closing? Do you have
I
anything?
just want to thank you all. I'm so glad to have been able to talk to you. This has been a delight for me, and I hope you really enjoy the book.
Thank you. And so now I'll turn it over to Garbo in the space, and she will dismiss us from here.
Thank you.
Dr. Roberts, I want to say, when you ever come back to Little Rock, we want you to come back and do an in-person book signing, because we can do this all over again. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I sure will. Thank you for the invitation.
Bye.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
So Dr. Roberts, hello. Dr. Terrence Roberts.